What if undercover cops battled each other in a chaotic mix-up? Or mysterious voices led a woman to uncover a hidden brain tumor? Picture a diver swallowed by a whale and living to tell the tale. These aren't wild fantasies, they're real events that push the boundaries of reality. Join us as we unravel mind-bending true stories, a bizarre Detroit standoff, Brenda's chilling medical mystery, and Michael Packard's unbelievable survival at sea. Get ready, truth is about to get stranger than fiction. The undercover cop standoff in Detroit. On the morning of November 9th, 2017, in Detroit, Michigan, two undercover police teams found themselves in a bizarre, unexpected confrontation that seemed more suited for a Hollywood script than real life. The operation, which had been carefully planned by the Detroit Special Operations Team, was intended to catch drug dealers in the act. This operation, called a push-off, involves undercover officers pretending to be drug dealers to lure potential buyers into a trap, where the officers reveal their identities and arrest the suspects. The concept seems straightforward enough, but what happened next was anything but. The officers had been working undercover in the area for weeks, observing local drug activity and waiting for the right moment to catch dealers red-handed. The house they were using as their base of operations was strategically chosen for its proximity to known drug hotspots. It was all business as usual until it wasn't. The officers set up at the house, waiting for their first potential buyers. As they saw two men approach, the officers opened the door, invited them in, and began their typical routine. The customers, however, had other plans. As soon as the officers began to reveal their badges, the buyers whipped out their own badges and guns, ordering the officers to the ground. It turns out, these weren't your average drug buyers. They were another set of undercover officers from a different precinct who had been sent on their own push-off operation in the same area. Neither team had any idea the other was there, and both sets of officers were now caught in a surreal standoff. The moment was tense, each group pointing guns at the other, unsure of who was friend and who was foe. The absurdity of the situation was not lost on them. They were all undercover agents, trained to spot the signs of law enforcement, yet neither group recognized the other. It was as if they were playing a game of who's the real cop that had spiraled out of control. As the standoff continued, insults and threats were hurled back and forth. At any moment, it seemed like the situation could escalate into something much worse, but instead of gunfire, the two groups of officers began to fight. The tension and confusion reached a boiling point, and in the heat of the moment, the cops resorted to throwing punches, each side believing they were facing adversaries. One officer, sweating under the pressure of the standoff, gritted his teeth and shouted, "I don't know who you are, but I'll take you down if I have to." On the other side, another officer growled, "Don't think you can intimidate me. I know exactly what I'm doing." With each insult, the situation became even more ridiculous, and in the chaos, they completely forgot that they were supposed to be working together. It wasn't until the dust settled and the adrenaline began to wear off that the realization hit both teams. They had mistakenly confronted their own colleagues. The scene that followed was almost comical. Both teams, now sheepishly lowering their weapons, realized their mistake. The officers exchanged awkward apologies, their pride bruised as badly as their bodies. Some of the officers couldn't help but chuckle nervously, muttering, "I can't believe that just happened." Fortunately, no one was seriously injured, though two officers did require medical attention for minor injuries. One had a black eye, and another sported a split lip. As word of the incident spread, it quickly became a source of embarrassment for the police force. Detroit's police chief publicly acknowledged the snafu as a mistake, but also suggested that, in some strange way, the officers' ability to remain so deeply undercover was a testament to their skill. They had been so good at blending in that they didn't even recognize each other, a point that earned them some reluctant praise despite the embarrassment of the situation. The idea that undercover agents could go so deep into their roles that they couldn't even identify one another seemed almost absurd, yet it proved just how thoroughly these officers had mastered their craft. The media had a field day with the story. Headlines ranged from the serious to the downright humorous, with some joking that the officers had been too good at their jobs. "Undercover officers out undercover, a comedy of errors," read one headline. Public opinion was divided. While some saw the mix-up as a comedy of errors, others felt the officers should have been more careful, given the potential consequences. One local resident remarked, "It's hilarious, but also kind of terrifying. These are the people who are supposed to be keeping us safe, and they can't even recognize each other." Still, the situation left a lot to be desired. If it had been a real drug bust, the confusion could have had deadly consequences. But this time, it was just a comedy of errors, a funny twist on an otherwise serious operation. In the aftermath, the reactions from the police force and the media ranged from embarrassment to admiration. The incident quickly became a symbol of the fine line between professionalism and absurdity. Some officers, particularly those involved in the altercation, felt humiliated by the mix-up, while others found a sense of humor in the situation. As one officer jokingly told a reporter, "We're professionals, just not the kind that should ever be allowed near each other during an undercover operation." While some demanded disciplinary action, others wondered if the officers involved deserved credit for maintaining their cover so effectively that they didn't even recognize their own colleagues. Could their failure to recognize each other be seen as a bizarre kind of success? The incident also brought a broader reflection on the nature of undercover work. Could this strange episode be seen as a reminder of how deep undercover agents often go into their roles? They assume false identities, blend into criminal worlds, and play parts so convincingly that, for a moment, even they lose sight of what is real. But even the best laid plans can sometimes lead to chaos. And, in this case, the chaos was both embarrassing and oddly amusing, leaving the police force and the public wondering just how far undercover agents should go in their pursuit of justice. In the aftermath of the incident, the police chief made it clear that while the mistake was regrettable, it was also a learning experience. "These things happen in law enforcement," he said, "and while it was an embarrassing misstep, we'll learn from it." The situation, absurd as it was, had brought to light some important questions about the nature of undercover work. Was this just a fluke, or did it signal deeper flaws in the way undercover operations were planned and executed? But, as we continue, let's take a closer look at a different kind of unbelievable event. A tale from the world of medicine that will have you questioning the very limits of reality itself. What happens when the impossible becomes a matter of life and death? The voice that led to a tumor discovery. It was the winter of 1984 when Brenda, a healthy middle-aged woman living in London, had an experience that would completely change her life. One evening, as she sat in her living room reading a book, she heard a voice. It was unlike any voice she had ever encountered. It spoke clearly, with an unsettling calm, saying, "Please don't be afraid. I know this must be shocking for you to hear me speaking to you like this, but this was the easiest way I could think of." The voice continued, introducing itself as something familiar, something that, in her mind, shouldn't be possible. "My friend and I used to work at the children's hospital, and we would like to help you." Brenda was stunned. She couldn't comprehend what was happening. No one was in the room with her, yet the voice sounded so real, so direct. She had never heard voices before. Could she have imagined this? Maybe it was just a fluke. She brushed it off, hoping it was simply a figment of her imagination or a fleeting moment of stress. But as the hours passed, the voice returned. And with it, a strange sense of urgency. The voice spoke again. "Brenda, this is not a hallucination. We are real. We want to help you." At first, Brenda thought she was losing her mind. She convinced herself that there was no way this could be real. How could it be? Her mind was playing tricks on her. But as the days went by, the voice returned with increasing frequency, offering guidance that made her nervous yet oddly compelled to listen. It was always the same. The voice was persistent, repeating that she needed to pay attention. Waking up the next morning, Brenda went about her day, dismissing the strange events. But the voice wasn't ready to let her go. It returned, this time speaking with even more clarity. It told her she needed to seek help, that there was something deeply wrong inside her body. In a panic, she visited her doctor, explaining what had been happening, hoping for an explanation that would put her fears to rest. The doctor, after hearing her story, decided to refer her to a psychiatrist for further evaluation. Brenda, skeptical of the whole situation, was unsure if this would bring any answers. She had no history of mental illness, no obvious cause for these auditory hallucinations. Still, she complied, hoping that somehow this would help her understand what was happening. After a thorough examination, the psychiatrist diagnosed her with functional hallucinatory psychosis, a condition where the individual hears voices without any apparent medical reason. "You're not imagining this," the psychiatrist explained. "But we have no clear explanation for why this is happening. We will treat this with antipsychotic medication, and with time, the voices should stop." Brenda felt a sense of relief, yet a lingering unease stuck with her. Was this really just psychosis, or was there something more to this? She couldn't shake the feeling that the voices had a purpose. They were trying to tell her something important. The idea that she might be losing her mind plagued her, but there was something in the voices that seemed too genuine to ignore. Despite the diagnosis, she hoped they weren't the ramblings of a deteriorating mind. Over the next couple of weeks, she took the prescribed medication diligently. Slowly, the voices began to fade. They were no longer as persistent, no longer as clear. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity of inner turmoil, she sat in the psychiatrist's office once again. "The voices are gone," she said, a mix of relief and disbelief in her voice. "I feel like a weight has been lifted." Her psychiatrist observed her with an unreadable expression. "That's a good sign," he said. "But we still don't know what caused them. Just keep up with the medication and we'll see how things progress." For a brief moment, Brenda thought everything had returned to normal. She even went on vacation with her family outside London to celebrate what she believed was the end of her ordeal. But the calm was short-lived. As she settled in for a quiet vacation, the voices returned with the same urgency as before. "Brenda," they said, "you need to return to London immediately. Something is wrong. You must go to the address we give you." The voices insisted, and despite her skepticism, Brenda felt the pull of their message. She couldn't ignore them, not this time. The fear that something serious was wrong with her body made it impossible to disregard the commands. Reluctantly, she convinced her husband and children to cut their vacation short, returning to London to follow the strange instructions. They arrived at the specific street the voices had mentioned. As they drove down the quiet road, Brenda's heart raced. At the end of the street stood a building that looked eerily familiar, a brain scan unit at a local hospital. It was then that the voice returned. "You need to go inside," it said. "Request a brain scan. There is a tumor in your brain, and it is causing your brainstem to swell." Stunned, Brenda hesitated. How could she possibly ask for a brain scan based on something as bizarre as hearing voices? But the voice was insistent, and she feared the consequences of ignoring it. She stepped out of the car, trembling, and approached the building. When she entered the brain scan unit, the staff looked at her with confusion. "Who referred you for the scan?" one of the nurses asked. "I don't have a referral," Brenda stammered, "but I've been hearing voices that told me to come here. They said I need to get a brain scan." The staff, understandably skeptical, hesitated. "A scan is very expensive, and without a referral, we can't just let you in. You need a doctor's note," the nurse explained. Frustrated, Brenda called her psychiatrist, explaining the situation. After a long conversation, her psychiatrist agreed to make a call to get the scan arranged. A month later, Brenda found herself in the MRI machine, anxiously awaiting the results. When the scan was complete, the doctor confirmed what she had been dreading. She had a brain tumor, and her brainstem was indeed swollen. The doctors were shocked. Despite the severity of the condition, Brenda had shown no symptoms at all. The tumor had gone unnoticed, and the swelling in her brainstem could have had catastrophic effects if left untreated. The doctors explained that she had two options: wait and see if symptoms appeared, or undergo surgery to remove the tumor immediately. Brenda, knowing that waiting could be disastrous, chose surgery. A few days later, she underwent the procedure, which was a success. When she woke up in recovery, the voice spoke to her one final time. "We are pleased to have helped you. Goodbye." After that moment, the voices were gone forever. Brenda never heard them again. Despite the medical community's confusion over the origins of the voices, Brenda could not deny their strange, uncanny accuracy. To this day, no one knows who or what was behind the mysterious voices in her head. But they led her to a life-saving discovery, and for that, she would forever be grateful. Michael Packard and the whale that swallowed him. Michael Packard had always known the ocean in its many forms. As a commercial lobster diver, he spent much of his life underwater, getting up close and personal with sea creatures. But on June 11, 2021, he found himself in an encounter that would be the ultimate test of his survival skills, one so unbelievable that it felt more like the script of a bizarre movie than an actual event. Michael and his longtime diving partner, Josiah, had set out for a routine lobster dive off the coast of Cape Cod. The morning was calm, the water clear. It was the perfect day for what they loved most, diving deep into the sea to catch lobsters. Michael had his scuba gear on, ready to dive, while Josiah stayed aboard the boat, prepared to assist Michael and keep watch. The plan was simple. Michael would dive down, collect the lobsters, and return to the surface. Everything seemed normal, as it often did on these dives. But that calm morning would soon turn into something Michael would never forget. As Michael descended into the ocean, his surroundings were peaceful, almost tranquil. The water was calm, the light from above casting dancing patterns on the ocean floor. He was around 45 feet down when, without warning, something massive struck him from behind. The force was like nothing he had ever felt before. It felt as though a truck had collided with him. The impact was so jarring that it knocked his mouthpiece from his mouth, leaving him gasping for air. Everything around him went pitch black. Panic set in as Michael fumbled in the darkness, his hands reaching out desperately. What was happening? His body was thrust into an enclosed space, but it wasn't the smoothness of a rock or the familiar surface of the ocean floor that his hands encountered. These walls were soft, yet firm at the same time, and they seemed to move, pulsating around him. The space was large enough to feel like he was inside some kind of cave, but it was shifting violently, as though it were alive. The fear intensified as he realized that the pressure on his legs was growing stronger. He couldn't figure out what it was, but the claustrophobic pressure was undeniable. He tried to focus, his hands desperately seeking any familiar surface, but there was nothing. His mind raced with terrifying thoughts. Am I trapped inside something? Michael wondered, but the thought was so outlandish, he couldn't even process it properly. And then it hit him. His panic turned to dread as he realized that he was no longer surrounded by water. The walls weren't walls at all, they were the inside of something much larger. It wasn't a shark. The walls were too soft, too moving in a rhythmic, pulsating manner. It was at that moment that the horrifying truth struck him. He had been swallowed by a whale. For what felt like an eternity, Michael was trapped inside the mouth of a humpback whale. The whale, likely a juvenile, had no intention of eating him. Whales typically feed on small fish, but its instinct had triggered a violent reaction once it realized it had taken in something far too large to digest. The whale began to thrash its head from side to side, trying to rid itself of the unwanted intruder. Michael could hear the rush of water, the violent churning as the whale struggled to dislodge him. He was trapped, struggling to breathe, his mind a whirlwind of confusion and terror. Every moment felt like it could be his last, the crushing weight of the whale's mouth pressing down on him. And then, just as suddenly as the chaos began, the whale spat him out. The release was immediate and overwhelming. Michael found himself thrown into the open ocean once again, gasping for air, his body sore from the pressure. The water was churning, turbulent from the violent shake of the whale's head. As he rose to the surface, he could see the tail of the immense creature swimming away from him, disappearing into the deep. Still in a state of shock, Michael managed to signal Josiah, who had been anxiously waiting in the boat. Josiah rushed to his side, pulling him into the boat as Michael, shaken but alive, muttered the unbelievable words, "I was inside of it. The whale tried to eat me." Once back on shore, Michael was rushed to the hospital for evaluation. Despite the intensity of the experience, Michael had suffered no life-threatening injuries. The only visible marks were significant bruising on his legs, the result of the whale's mouth clamping down on him. Other than that, he was remarkably unharmed. The doctors were baffled. How could someone survive such an ordeal with so little injury? The whale, according to experts, was likely a juvenile humpback, around 30 to 35 feet in length. These whales are not predators, but this one had accidentally taken Michael in as it was likely feeding on smaller fish. While the experience could have been fatal, he could have drowned, suffocated, or been crushed by the whale's jaw. Michael's survival seemed almost like a miracle. The real miracle, however, was Michael's casual response after everything. When asked about his incredible escape, he shrugged it off with an almost nonchalant tone. "Well, you know," he said, "whales just come out of nowhere sometimes. They scoop you up, and then they spit you out. Happens all the time." His reaction, calm and almost amusing given the circumstances, only added to the surreal nature of the entire event. It was as if his brush with death was just another day at the office, one of many bizarre encounters with fate that had marked his life. As the story of Michael's extraordinary experience spread, it seemed even stranger than fiction. What were the odds? How could someone survive being swallowed by a whale and emerge without more than a few bruises? The sheer improbability of the event left everyone who heard it shaking their heads in disbelief. But for Michael, it was just another unbelievable chapter in a life that seemed to defy the odds at every turn. In fact, despite the incredible nature of the event, Michael wasn't deterred. He wasn't the type to be frightened by the ocean or the creatures that lurked beneath its surface. No, once he had recovered from his ordeal, he did exactly what he had always done. He got back into the water and went back to diving. Because for Michael Packard, a brush with a whale's mouth wasn't the end. It was just another story to tell, one that would no doubt be met with skepticism and wonder alike. And when he told it, he would still have that same casual smile, as if it were just another day at sea. Michael's survival wasn't just a remarkable feat of chance. It was a reminder of how life can sometimes surprise us with the most extraordinary and surreal moments, where truth truly is stranger than fiction. As we reflect on the extraordinary tales we've explored, one undeniable theme rises to the surface: truth is often stranger than fiction. The stories of Brenda's haunting voices, Michael's near-fatal encounter with a whale, and the sheer unpredictability of life's twists all showcase how reality can leave us questioning what is truly possible. These events defy conventional logic, and in doing so, they challenge our assumptions about what we believe to be real. Take Brenda, for instance. At first, her experience with hearing voices in her head seemed like something straight out of a psychological thriller. Doctors initially dismissed it, diagnosing her with psychosis, but as time passed, the voices led her to uncover a hidden truth: a tumor in her brain. The more we ponder Brenda's story, the more we are forced to reckon with the idea that sometimes, reality has a way of presenting itself in the most bizarre forms. It's a reminder that our perceptions of the world, of what is possible, of what is normal, are often challenged by experiences we can't immediately explain. Then there's Michael Packard, whose tale seems like something ripped from the pages of an adventure novel. After diving for lobsters off the coast of Cape Cod, he was unexpectedly swallowed by a whale. The sheer absurdity of such an event is mind-boggling, yet it happened. And, what's even more remarkable, he walked away from the experience with only minor injuries. How is it that someone can survive such an impossible situation with so little damage? This question alone challenges our very understanding of the limits of human survival. Michael's calm attitude afterward, almost as if it was just another odd occurrence in his life, only amplifies the surreal nature of this event. It reminds us that sometimes, the improbable not only happens, it happens with eerie regularity. These stories leave us with a profound sense of awe at the unpredictability of life. In both cases, survival and mystery take center stage, with each person encountering forces beyond their control. The characters in these narratives didn't just face physical threats, they also confronted the unfathomable aspects of existence itself. Both Brenda and Michael were forced to face realities that didn't conform to the logical patterns of the world they knew, and in doing so, they became living testaments to the resilience of the human spirit. What's more, these stories urge us to reflect on the nature of perception. How often do we dismiss what seems outlandish or impossible, convinced that it couldn't happen to us? Yet, time and time again, we are faced with the truth that the line between reality and fiction is often razor thin. It's not that reality is stranger than fiction in every case, but rather that what we define as fiction can sometimes be the thing that best prepares us for what's truly out there, lurking just beyond our understanding. The essence of these three stories, survival, mystery, and the uncanny, reminds us that there's so much more to life than meets the eye. Every day we encounter the mundane, the predictable. But within that ordinary existence, there are stories waiting to surprise us, to push us beyond the boundaries of our imagination. As you reflect on these unbelievable tales, ask yourself, how often do we let our preconceived notions about the world keep us from seeing the extraordinary in the ordinary? What if life is far more mysterious than we give it credit for? Perhaps, like Brenda and Michael, the key is to embrace the strange, to entertain the idea that what we deem impossible could one day be our reality. We are often reminded that reality is not bound by the limits of logic. And sometimes, truth emerges in ways that are far more compelling, far more incredible, than any fiction ever could be. So, as you move forward, remember these stories and let them remind you that reality itself is a strange and wondrous thing, one that we may never fully understand, but can always be surprised by.